Palm oil. You've probably heard of it, yet don't know exactly what it is. But unless you're on an exclusive nut and berry diet, you're probably eating some today. Or at least rub some on your body this morning. The miraculous, versatile substance is used in thousands of everyday products, from chips and ice cream to shampoo and fuel. On average, we consume about 8 kilograms, or around 18 pounds of palm oil every year. It comes from the red fruits of an oil palm tree.
Palm is usually not a whole ingredient in something, with the exception of cooking oil. We're often using a fraction. It's a part of the fruit, a part of the oil. So it's really easy for that to be invisible within a product.
Seems like the ultimate natural resource, right? Just pick the fruit off the tree and make stuff with it. But palm oil has become very controversial in recent years for its cost on the environment. Vast swaths of forests have been burned by farmers to make way for oil palm plantations, causing the wholesale destruction of natural habitats and ultimately contributing to climate change. There have also been reports of serious labor rights abuses in the industry.
Dengan kejadian-kejadian masa lalu tentang kebakaran hutan kita, jadi petani sudah merasakan akibat dampak yang ditimbulkan dari kebakaran hutan. Itu khususnya asap. Kami pernah mengalami asap itu hampir 2 bulan berturut-turut. Jadi rasanya sesak di dada. Itu yang paling parah yang kami alami adanya dengan kebakaran hutan. Walaupun di areal kami itu tidak ada kebakaran hutan.
Despite public and private sector efforts to mitigate palm oil's environmental impact, only 20% of the world's palm oil is certified as sustainable today. Like most problems related to the climate crisis, there doesn't seem to be one clear solution. The damage being done by the palm oil industry is significant and not going away anytime soon. But farmers, big companies, and scientists are working in their own ways to try to chip away at its negative effects.
The way that we produce food now is a modern miracle, but it's also having an enormous impact on the environment. We have to make changes, we have to work towards creating these novel foodstuffs which have much lower impact, which are healthy and delicious and different to what we had before.
Sampai 25 tahun hidup di Lampung sebagai petani musiman, yaitu petani jagung. Saya pindah ke Riau di tahun 1999, ikut orang tua. Alhamdulillah sekarang saya mempunyai 6 hektar per kapling, berarti dalam 4 hektar itu saya mempunyai hasil 6 ton per bulan.
Eddie is one of 16 million people working in the palm oil industry in Indonesia, the world's biggest palm oil producer, churning out about 47 million tons in 2020 alone.
Penanaman sawit itu sampai umur 36 bulan itu baru mulai ada buah. Setelah umur 48 bulan, buah itu baru bisa dikirim ke pabrik, dan di pabrik untuk diproses menjadi CPO.
About 40% of the oil palm plantations in Indonesia are owned by small-scale farmers like Eddie, who have less than 25 hectares of land. But many smallholders didn't have an understanding of sustainable farming. Slashing and burning the forest was common because it was the cheapest and fastest way to make land to grow oil palm trees. Between 2005 and 2013, almost half of the deforestation in Indonesia was linked to oil palm cultivation. 2015 was the worst year. Between June and October, fires burned an area roughly the size of Rwanda, or the US state of Maryland. Researchers linked the toxic haze, which lingered for weeks, to more than 100,000 premature deaths in Indonesia and in neighboring countries like Malaysia and Singapore.
Saya sendiri tidak berani melakukan itu. Karena kemarin tahun 2015 juga ada kebakaran hutan di daerah Riau. Tapi untuk saat sekarang, itu semenjak adanya peraturan dilarang penggunaan api di daerah lahan sawit.
In 2016, Indonesian President Joko Widodo imposed a moratorium on new permits for clearing forest and peatland for oil palm cultivation. Deforestation linked to palm oil is still happening, but educational campaigns and stricter law enforcement have reduced it significantly. More farmers like Eddie have joined smallholders associations like this one. With financial support from NGOs and big companies, they've got certification from institutes like the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil, or RSPO. Sustainable palm oil has to meet strict standards, such as using best farming practices, conserving the environment, and considering employees' benefits and rights. But Eddie's only one of a tiny number of certified smallholders because many farmers don't have the resources or access to get certified. And challenges still remain after being certified.
Kalau musimnya lagi namanya kami bilang meledak buah itu kalau harganya tinggi, kita mungkin dengan pegawai negeri 3A mungkin banyak kita untuk yang kita terima per bulannya. Tapi kalau fast track, harga jatuh, ya harga kita, pendapatan kita juga nggak jauh beda daripada buruh-buruh kasar.
The other piece of the puzzle is big palm oil companies.
Here at Golden Agri Resources, we have more than 500,000 hectares of palm oil plantations across Indonesia. But we also buy fresh fruit bunches from other producers of palm. And so we actually trade and process closer to around 6 to 8 million tons of what's called crude palm oil or palm-related products.
Harvested fruit bunches are sent to mills and then refineries for processing. The outer orange part of the fruit creates crude palm oil, which can be turned into many different products like cooking oil and biofuel. The white creamy substance inside the kernel creates palm kernel oil, which is used in cosmetics, soaps, and hand sanitizers.
In the past, criticism of the industry in terms of its impact on forests, wildlife, and even on local communities sadly was justified. We want to be able to produce the equivalent of 1 million hectares of land on that 500,000 hectares of land. So focusing on using biotechnology techniques, but also really good farming practices.
The full traceability of the supply chain still remains a challenge. Third-party plantations are usually in remote locations spanning millions of hectares. Another challenge is consumer commitment. About 20% of the world's palm oil was certified as sustainable, but buyers only bought half of it.
So the greatest demand still comes from buyers in Europe and the US, to a certain extent Australia. However, the largest volumes are sold in countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, India, and China, where demand for a sustainable product is still very low.
Making palm oil production sustainable is crucial, but some scientists are hoping we could stop using it completely. But the researchers working on an alternative to palm oil will need to ensure their products are competitive in quality and price.
Ultimately, there's no mystery to palm oil. It's a relatively simple group of compounds of which other organisms can make as well, and that's what we've been able to mimic with the yeast. So this process is very similar to brewing beer, technology we've known about for thousands of years, where when you brew beer, you take sugars and grow a brewing yeast on them, which produces ethanol, which we can drink. In our process, we're using natural yeast, which naturally make edible oils.
Finding the right yeast is key. After a few years of researching and experimenting, the team found Mechnikovia pulcherrima, a yeast that grows on the surface of grapes all over the world. And then they spent another 8 years developing the yeast and the process to grow it.
Here we have to use large drums and feed kilograms of the sugar. It's dragged into the reactor here and then fed to the yeast. Now, here we have 50 litres of culture, and this is enough to make kilograms of yeast in a week. This is also a really good mimic to demonstrate what an industrial process will truly look like on the large scale. So the yeast we selected at first didn't make much oil, but it had a number of other attributes which allow us to produce it on the large scale. So it can be produced under a wide temperature range. It can be produced under a wide range of pHs. It also can use a whole range of sugars, saccharides and proteins to grow, which allows us to use waste resources very efficiently.
The team has completed research and development, successfully fed the yeast with waste food like coffee grounds and agricultural leftovers like waste straw and sawdust. Now they're running a pilot producing kilograms of palm oil substitute per week and aim to increase that to tons per week within a year.
So here we have the yeast and you have these giant cells which are then full of oil, which we can extract.
A startup has been spun out from the project, raising over $2.5 million, with the goal to bring the product to grocery store shelves.
In the last few decades, we've seen people really starting to choose alternative products, alternative analogues to meat, for example, products like yeast protein from corn. We see ourselves as continuing that journey and being the next generation of novel foods.
Regardless of what the future holds, the palm oil industry needs to make serious changes today.
Saya ingin berkebun sawit itu secara berkelanjutan dan lestari. Dengan kebun sawit inilah merupakan sumber utama penghidupan kami, sehingga akan dapat saya wariskan kepada anak cucu saya.